Yeah, Dane, welcome to the show. So I wanted to talk about Maui specifically today and the weather manipulation. So it's almost 2 years now since the Maui wildfires. And as you saw in our previous report, as Natalie mentioned, they have not rebuilt these homes along the coast. They have not been approved for permits along the coast, clearly. They have been allowed to rebuild a little bit more inland, but this looked like a land grab from the very, very beginning. And right away on our show, we were saying directed energy weapons or weather manipulation. Clearly something seemed to be going on here, but you, my friend, have essentially confirmed that yes, in fact, weather manipulation, geoengineering, climate engineering has been used to destroy Maui. Am I right?
There's no question about that, Natalie and Clayton. Thank you for your exceptional reporting on the permit and property debacles that go with this, the agendas and objectives being carried out. In regard to what happened in Lahaina, there's nothing natural about it. And with climate engineering, those that don't understand the issue and the technology involved, they can actually manipulate and are manipulating atmospheric pressure zones, which then affects surface wind flows. So in the case of Lahaina, we had an extremely anomalous high pressure zone to the north, and there are energy weapons like HARP in Alaska that can and are transmitting extraordinary amounts of power into the electrically charged ionosphere. HARP can transmit 3.6 million watts of power. It causes an electrical chain reaction, which superheats that layer of the atmosphere. And that expansion pushes downward also, and that creates the high pressure zone on the surface, which spins clockwise in the northern hemisphere, which spins upper level winds clockwise around that. So picture a clockwise spinning rotation north of Lahaina. South of Lahaina, we had a counterclockwise spinning, a very anomalous low pressure zone also being manipulated. And picture between those two, you create a surface wind field, massive surface wind flows, a bellows effect. And that is absolutely a result of climate engineering and atmospheric pressure zone manipulation. As far as the land itself, Natalie and Clayton, we had a flash drought declared 1 week before those fires were ignited. Source of ignition, separate subject completely. We can debate that, but what established the conditions for those fires to burn with such ferocity, and that is climate engineering, period, not just the bellows effect from the 80-mile-an-hour winds, drying out the region, flash drought effect, exactly what's described in the U.S. military document that you showed a moment ago, that geoengineeringwatch.org found on military archives and posted. And you have the incendiary dust. That's very important to consider. So you have this extended period of time, no precipitation, an incendiary dust. It's part of climate engineering operations, starting with aluminum nanoparticles that are such an effective incendiary that that's the primary element used in military demolitions, thermite. So again, this incendiary dust covering everything.
It's like a fire starter? Is that what you mean? It was already in place.
Once ignited, Natalie, yes. Yeah. I mean, again, This is a military demolitions capable of creating extraordinarily hot temperatures. And when you add that wind, the surface flow, it's a bellows effect that creates much hotter temperatures. Every condition that was there in Lahaina is absolutely directly attributable to climate intervention operations, AKA weather warfare, period.
So what's amazing to me, I'd never heard, and I know Philip is probably itching to like jump in and ask this question or ask questions too. And Philip, jump in when you want. But I've never heard of a flash drought. Usually, to me, that's like something that builds up over time. Like we've had 3 months now of no rain. That's not a flash. So I have heard of flash flooding. So they can literally create flash droughts,
like the way you dehydrate your beef jerky.
Yes, yeah. That is exactly the term. That's not my term. That is the term from the meteorological community for what was declared in Lahaina 1 week before those ignitions, flash drought. So when you saturate the atmosphere with desiccant particles, aluminum's a desiccant. It was used in deodorant to the detriment of our health, but you can actually dry out lower atmospheric RH, relative humidity, which sucks the moisture out of everything, foliage, everything on the ground. And yes, flash drought is now an official term and used commonly. It was used specifically in Lahaina. So again, every piece of this puzzle we see fits completely with what's described in the military document, wildfires as a military weapon, as the preparation for that kind of incineration. Every single piece of this puzzle matches, Clayton and Natalie.
So couldn't we say then, well, like, all right, I just want to play the devil's advocate here. Let me be the skeptic, which is not usually my role. But Oh, this is all natural. You can have a flash drought. You could have these bellows like 80-mile-an-hour winds that come out of nowhere. You could have the perfect conditions for all of this. And then, it was the downed power lines, Dane. That's what started. It was the downed power lines, even though I think we knew that this was all coming, and I think they knew about the power. Anyway, now I'm reversing my own skepticism by answering my own question. But
so stop there and ask the question.
Yeah. So it's all natural, Dane.
Again, this is that kind of argument being made and ignoring what we can see on satellite imagery, these operations being conducted over these regions. And for those that don't think, the skeptics that don't think that this kind of power is held over the hydrological cycle, for example, it's not speculation, theory, or conjecture. We have historical record. Project Popeye in Vietnam in the 60s, so successful at controlling the flow of precipitation over that country that in the 70s they passed INMOD treaties, environmental modification treaties, forbidding that kind of weather manipulation for wartime purposes, but not over a country's own population. That's key. There's always those caveats, those loopholes. So again, that technology is not disputed scientifically, and any insinuation by official sources that there was anything natural about the Lahaina fires is ludicrous. It would be like, again, running someone over in a crosswalk and saying, hey, it wasn't me, people die, it's natural. No. When we have these factors that we know have a cause and effect, we have to resort to Occam's razor principle that all things being equal, the most likely causal factors can't be ignored. And again, when you have aircraft dispersing desiccant particles that are also incendiaries that disrupt the hydrological cycle, they cut off the precipitation, that coat the foliage and the structures with an incendiary dust, whatever the source of ignition, then you blowtorch those flames through those urban regions. There is nothing natural about this. We saw the same thing in the Palisades fire, dried out completely, almost 9 months with zero rain in that location. Not a coincidence. We see the same thing, Clayton and Natalie, for example, in the Canadian fires from 2023, the drying out of those regions and the incineration there. We have peer-reviewed science study advocating, if you can imagine this, advocating for the intentional incineration of boreal forests as a form of geoengineering. Think about that. So again, with the Lahaina fire, there's nothing natural about the pressure zones that created the wind flows, nothing natural about the drying out of that region, nothing natural about the incendiary dust that coated everything. So again, this is verifiably a weather warfare event, period.
Can I say something about the lasers? Now, in my report, and I encourage people to go watch that separate piece that we'll release separately on the current state of Maui and the rebuilding process. And in that report, I talked about the distraction. There was so much, I think, and maybe this is a sort of a look over here, not over here kind of thing on the lasers, the idea of using directed energy lasers to ignite these fires. You think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you think that's a total distraction and takes away from the real story, which is the weather modification piece of this?
That narrative has done exactly that. So am I saying that directed energy weapons don't exist? No, I'm not saying that. They definitely exist. And especially when we look at, and many people don't associate installations like HARP in Alaska, which is an ionosphere heater. And there are many around the globe. There's another in Antarctica, and you guys have covered that, I believe, as well. That is a directed energy weapon, but not of the type that many people construe in relation to Lahaina, for example. So if we look at current technology, could an airborne platform actually ignite something on the ground? Yes, that technology definitely appears to exist. And if we look beyond that, once there's smoke in the air, or if there's any other type of cloud cover also obstructing a surface to ground trajectory, laser anything doesn't work, can't work. That's why the laser targeting in, for example, the Middle East can't work if there's any sandstorms or anything else. You cannot have obstructions. And a platform big enough to do the type of damage that's claimed by some of those narratives weighs about 1.8 million pounds, takes 18 semi-trucks to move that platform. That's not flying. So again, what we're trying to get people to focus on, again, is not a denial of very technologically advanced weapons that could be used under some circumstances. What we're trying to point out is that we have other forms of these weapons, like ionosphere heaters, that are creating the pressure zones. Again, the high pressure to the north of Lahaina, the anomalous low pressure to the south. Between you have this blowtorch wind field. That is, in fact, a form of directed energy weapon that's being used to manipulate the pressure zones. And the actual jet aircraft aerosol sprayed dispersions that have been occurring for weeks and months over a location like Lahaina are core to this issue. They establish conditions on the ground, a template with which once there's an ignition source, Clayton and Natalie, there's an unstoppable, catastrophic, completely unnatural blowtorch scenario. That's what happened.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think Philip has a question.
Go ahead, Philip.
Oh, no, yeah. Well, I was just going to say, if you can create those conditions, a Zippo would take care of it. You don't need a laser. It's like if you can create the conditions, yeah. But so my question, because last time you were on, Dane, the Clayton and I were talking about afterwards, and it's the thing that I can't get over mentally is the why. So if you have people that have this ability, the capability of manipulating the weather, and they're dropping the aluminum nanoparticles everywhere, they're poisoning the soil. They're basically making the earth unlivable for humans. So it's the why ends up being do they want to be kings of a graveyard, but how are they going to survive? That's the thing that what is the motivation behind it? Is it just ignorance, or is there I just don't understand the why?
That's such a key question, Philip. Thank you for asking. And yes, it's doing everything you described. In fact, the ubiquitous contamination of the planet with bioavailable aluminum nanoparticulates is sterilizing everything, soils, root systems. That's why every time the wind blows, you see trees tipping over now, because the root systems are dying off, just like the crowns are dying off. They're destroying the ozone layer. So few talking about that issue. That's an immediate existential threat by itself. No, it hasn't gotten better. No, it's not the hairspray cans. Climate engineering is the core causal factor for ozone destruction, which is, again, part of the drying out of Lahaina as well. So why would, quote, they do this to themselves? Because we're not dealing with sanity. We're literally not dealing with sanity. Why would they, the same they, ultimately those who print the money, that's who's at the top of this food chain, why would they detonate hydrogen bombs in the magnetosphere? Project Starfish Prime, Project Fishbowl. They thought it could collapse the entire atmosphere. Did that stop them? No. There's no dealing with insanity. And the psychoanalysis of those in power reflects a common thread. And that thread is this, quote unquote, from the manual: a near total lack of comprehension as to the consequences of their actions, even to themselves. Does an addict care the next fix might kill them? No, they don't. They do it anyway. And we're dealing with the power addiction here. They're not going to let go. And climate engineering, AKA weather warfare, is the crown jewel weapon of the controllers, the weapon with which they can and are bringing populations to their knees. Without those populations ever even knowing they're under assault, they blame it on nature. Perfect question, Philip. Thank you.
I mean, and it's almost like, Philip, and maybe I'm wrong, but it's almost like the idea of you went to McDonald's, you got a big bag of McDonald's, and you're done with all the garbage, and you just throw it out the window. It's like a small microcosm of the larger destruction of the planet. They don't see that if I kept doing that every day in my neighborhood, my whole yard would be filled with garbage, and they don't care because that's how they operate mentally.
There's other aspects of this. Oh, I'm sorry, Phil. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was just gonna say it's as if they just the whole plan, the master plan, is just to be the last ones left, as opposed to yeah.
Yes, that's true. And also consider that this is the paradox that they are also using climate engineering. This is a very important component of these operations to mask some of the damage done, much of the damage done by ramping up the operations that caused the damage in the first place. And here's an example of that. When we were having, again, and I think we've discussed this before, snowstorms in New Orleans and Florida, while it's above freezing and raining in the whole polar region in the Arctic, that confuses and divides the population as to the true state of damage done to the climate already, much of it from climate engineering operations. So again, that paradox of using the same operations that caused much of the damage in the first place to try to mask some of that damage in an ongoing scenario so that they can continue to use this as a weapon. We have a military document titled Owning the Weather in 2025. That's a very interesting document to add into this equation because this has been and is a goal. And if they could control the cloud layer in 1962, as Lyndon Johnson stated on film on the record, it's the first 30 seconds of our weekly geoengineeringwatch.org commercial-free broadcast. He who owns the weather controls the world, or he who controls the weather controls the world. How far have they come since then? So again, we have so many layers to these operations. We have winter weather warfare, engineering wildfires, engineering drought. they can bring populations to their knees without those populations ever even knowing they're under assault. That's exactly what's occurring.
So you would say with 100% certainty, any doubt in your mind that what happened in Maui was intentional and carried out with weather manipulation?
Zero doubt. And we can back that up with data. There is nothing natural about those events. What set the template for those fires to burn with such ferocity? Again, source of ignition, separate subject. But in regard to what established the conditions for those fires to burn with such ferocity, that is absolutely a core cause of climate engineering, period.
All right.
Dane Wigington, always great to see you. Our audience loves you and loves your honesty and not afraid to hold truth to power here. We really appreciate it. I would encourage our audience to go watch your documentary, The Dimming, and visit geoengineeringwatch.org to learn more about this. You've got all the documents there. I've been going through them. It's a really important piece of this Maui story. Dane, great to see you.
My deepest gratitude to you, Clayton and Natalie. Without voices like yours, all our research would not get the exposure that we need to have. Thank you. My deepest gratitude to you and your followers. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Same to you. Thank you so much, Dane.